My name is Natalie Grant, and at 35 years old, I finally did something I had dreamed about for most of my adult life. I bought my dream home, a 1920s colonial revival tucked away in a quiet, upscale neighborhood just outside of Seattle. It had everything I ever wanted: ivy-covered brick, tall windows that bathed every room in natural light, a sunroom perfect for lazy Sunday mornings, and a kitchen big enough to host every holiday dinner I used to imagine having someday. For most people, a house is just a house. But for me, this place represented independence. It was proof that every late night at the architecture firm, every failed relationship I endured for the sake of building my career, every skipped vacation and canceled plan had been worth it. I wasn't just building structures, I was building a life that was finally my own. So when I planned my housewarming party, I didn't want anything fancy. Just a small gathering of close friends, a few colleagues, and my family, yes, including my older sister Claire, who had recently gone through a rough divorce and was raising 4 kids on her own. I wanted the evening to be about celebration, not stress, a new beginning, a warm welcome to the next chapter of my life. But I never could have imagined what Claire had planned, what she would say, what she had already done behind my back. That night, my beautiful new home, the one I had saved for, sacrificed for, dreamed of, suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. And it all started with one sentence. People often assume that success arrives overnight. They see the house, the designer wardrobe, the business card with the word senior printed in elegant font, and they think you had it easy. But for me, nothing about the journey was easy. I started from very little. My parents weren't poor, but we were one financial emergency away from ruin during most of my childhood. My mother worked at the clinic during the day and ran a home bakery at night. My father, when he was still around, bounced between jobs until he bounced right out of our lives when I was 12. After that, Mom raised my sister Claire and me on her own. Claire was the golden child, or at least, that's how it felt. She was bubbly, friendly, and good at winning people over. I was the quiet one, the planner, the list maker. Claire got by on charm. I got by on sheer effort. By the time I turned 15, I had a part-time job, top grades, and a wall covered in scholarship applications. I wanted something more than just survival. I wanted control over my life. And I believed the only way to get it was to work harder than everyone else. Architecture called to me because it was the perfect balance of logic and creativity. I poured myself into my studies, earning a scholarship to a top university, then clawed my way into one of the most competitive firms in the Pacific Northwest. While my friends were dating, partying, and living out their 20s, I was sleeping under my desk at the office, surviving on caffeine and willpower. There were costs, of course. Romantic relationships fizzled, friendships faded. I missed birthdays, reunions, and holidays. But I told myself it would all be worth it that someday. I'd build a life that made the sacrifices make sense. That someday came when I stepped onto the porch of the ivy-covered colonial house I now owned. I remember the moment like it happened this morning. The realtor handed me the keys, and I stood in the entryway alone, surrounded by the echo of empty rooms and the subtle scent of old wood and fresh paint. My voice cracked when I whispered aloud, "It's mine." I didn't need anyone to validate that moment for me. I didn't need applause or recognition. That house was a trophy more meaningful than any plaque or promotion. It was the culmination of 15 years of saying no to distractions, of putting myself last so I could someday come first. Of course, Claire didn't see it that way. To her, I was the selfish one, the sister who chose buildings over babies, who skipped Thanksgiving to fly to conferences, who had all that money but rarely asked about her kids' report cards or soccer games. It wasn't that I didn't care. I just didn't know how to bridge the gap between our lives anymore. Claire got married young, to a man named Ryan. He was a mechanic with a kind smile and an unpredictable temper. They had their first child when she was 22. By the time she turned 30, she had 4 daughters and a permanent look of exhaustion in her eyes. I tried to be supportive, offered babysitting money when I could, paid for school supplies, even designed their bathroom renovation for free, but somehow it never felt like enough. When her marriage fell apart, I helped her find a lawyer and quietly sent money for the deposit on a rental home. She never said thank you, not directly. But I figured that was just Claire being Claire, proud, emotional, and stubborn to the core. So when I told her I had bought a house and invited her to the housewarming party, her reaction caught me off guard. "That's amazing," she said. "I'd love to see it." But there was something flat in her tone, like she was holding something back. She didn't ask any questions, no. "How big is it?" or "What's the kitchen like?" That was strange, because Claire loved homes. She could talk for hours about wallpaper choices and color palettes. But that day, she said almost nothing. Still, I chalked it up to stress. Being a single mom with 4 kids under 13 would drain anyone. I didn't press her. In the weeks leading up to the party, I threw myself into preparations. I hired a caterer, curated a playlist, and coordinated floral arrangements for every room. The house, though not fully furnished, was elegant and welcoming. I wanted this to be more than just a celebration. I wanted it to be a statement. This was my space, my hard-earned sanctuary. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to mark the start of a new chapter. I even made sure Claire's girls had juice boxes and kid-friendly snacks because despite everything, I loved my nieces. They were bright, funny, and wildly imaginative. They deserved happiness. What I didn't know was that behind the scenes, Claire had been making plans of her own, plans that would take my dream home and turn it into something very different. My relationship with Claire had always been complicated. We loved each other, sure, but we didn't always like each other. Not in the everyday sense. She was the kind of person who cried during commercials, who made friends with waiters, who gave people the benefit of the doubt long after they'd run out of chances. And I was not. I liked boundaries. I liked plans. I liked space. Growing up, Claire acted like a second mother to me, especially after our dad left. She packed my lunches, braided my hair, and once even fought off a bully in the schoolyard when I was too scared to stand up for myself. Back then, I admired her, maybe even needed her. But as we got older, that dynamic turned into something less generous and more possessive. She expected me to come to her with everything. But when I started building a life of my own, one she didn't recognize, she became distant, or worse, passive-aggressive. "You're always working," she'd say when I missed family dinners. "Must be nice to just take off to Europe." She commented once when I posted a photo from Italy, and my personal favorite, "Your job doesn't hug you goodnight." I told myself not to take it personally, that she was just tired, overwhelmed, trying to make sense of a life that hadn't turned out the way she imagined. But still, the digs added up over time. When Claire's marriage collapsed, I was the first one she called, not for emotional support, but because she needed someone to pick up the kids while she screamed at Ryan in the driveway. I didn't hesitate. I left work early, canceled a presentation, and showed up, because that's what sisters do, right? But that moment set the tone for what came next. Claire didn't ask. She assumed. She assumed I'd help with bills. She assumed I'd watch the girls. She assumed I had the time and money and emotional space to be her safety net. And for a while, I wanted to be. But it didn't take long before I started to feel more like a resource than a relative. One particular day still stands out. I'd just finished the brutal week at work, pulled 3 all-nighters for a competition submission, and was planning to sleep through the weekend. Then Claire called. No greeting, no apology, just, "I need you to take the girls Saturday. I have an event." "What kind of event?" I asked. "None of your business," she snapped. Just be a good aunt. I almost said no. I should have said no. But I didn't. I said yes. Then spent my Saturday playing exhausted hostess to 4 sugar-high children while Claire went off presumably to a wine bar or maybe a date. I never asked. Because the truth was saying no to Claire was hard. Not because I was afraid of her, but because of the guilt. The invisible script we were both following. She raised you? Now it's your turn to give back. That script had been written into every interaction we had. Still, there were limits. And when I bought my house, I thought those limits were clear. I didn't tell anyone where it was until I had closed the deal. I didn't invite people to see it until I had it exactly the way I wanted. Not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted to savor it first. Alone. I knew Claire would have opinions. She always did. So I braced myself for commentary when I finally called her. I was prepared for, wow, must be nice. Or, isn't that a little much for one person? But instead, she just said, that's amazing. I'd love to see it. I should have known then that something was off. Claire never passed up the opportunity to make a snide comment about fancy people things. But I was so happy, so high off the dream-come-true moment, that I let it slide. In the days that followed, I got busy. Between coordinating renovations, interviewing interior designers, and managing a major pitch at work. I barely had time to eat, let alone dissect my sister's unusual silence. She didn't check in, didn't ask for photos, didn't offer to help me pack or move. That, too, should have been a red flag, but again, I let it go. It wasn't until a few days before the party that I started noticing odd things. A box of children's books appeared in the garage. A step stool was moved next to the downstairs bathroom sink. I assumed the cleaners had left it or that the previous owners had missed something during their move. Then, the Friday before the party. I came home late and found Claire's old minivan parked halfway down the block. I thought maybe she was visiting a neighbor, but I didn't ask. Because that's the thing about hindsight, it's always 20/20. Looking back, all the signs were there. The silence, the weird comments, the absence of curiosity. But in the moment, I was just excited. I had a new house, a new life. I was finally stepping into the version of myself I had worked so hard to become. And I genuinely thought my sister would be happy for me. Turns out, she had something else in mind entirely. The morning of the housewarming party, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. Not out of anxiety, but sheer excitement. It was the first time in years I wasn't waking up early for a deadline, a client, or a looming disaster. I was waking up for something joyful. For me. I slipped into my robe and wandered barefoot through the house, marveling again at the way the sunlight spilled through the tall windows and pooled onto the hardwood floors. I had chosen every piece of this home deliberately, the fixtures, the wallpaper in the entryway, the light fixture above the dining table. For the first time, I felt like I was walking through something that didn't just reflect my taste, it reflected my values. Space, peace, independence. The caterers were scheduled to arrive by noon. I had ordered a mix of elegant and comforting herb-roasted salmon, beet and arugula salad, artisan breads, and a tray of cupcakes with edible gold leaf. The florist had already delivered the arrangements tall, wild-looking centerpieces that added a touch of nature to the polished interior. By mid-afternoon, the music was playing, the drinks were chilling, and I was in my favorite cream jumpsuit, touching up lipstick in the mirror. I took one final walk through the house. Everything looked perfect. The guests began arriving a little after 5 p.m. First came my colleague Mia, who brought a bottle of vintage red and hugged me tightly. Then my friend Janice from grad school, who gasped audibly when she saw the double staircase and said, "Nat, this place is straight out of Architectural Digest." Everyone said the same thing. "You did it. This is amazing. You deserve it." And for a moment, I allowed myself to believe it. Then came the text. Running late. Be there soon. Claire? I didn't think much of it at first. Claire had 4 kids. Being late was basically her default mode. I replied with a thumbs up emoji and went back to mingling. By 6:30, the house was filled with the soft hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter. The girls I mentored at the firm were huddled near the bar, bonding with my friends from college. My old boss had pulled out his phone to take pictures of the garden and send them to his wife. I moved through the rooms like a conductor, subtly guiding the social symphony I'd orchestrated. At 700 on the dot, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Claire on the porch, her 4 girls bouncing behind her like popcorn in a kettle. She looked frazzled, hair pulled into a loose bun, no makeup, wearing a wrinkled dress that looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of a laundry basket. Tom, her ex-husband-to-be, stood beside her with a blank expression and a half-hearted smile. He held a reusable grocery bag that I assumed was the gift. Sorry we're late, Claire said breathlessly, leaning in for a hug. The girls were impossible to wrangle tonight. Before I could answer, her daughter Maisie, a loud and energetic 6-year-old, ran past me into the house. "Is this where we're gonna live?" she shouted. I blinked. What? Before I could process it, the other girls had followed her inside, yelling, shrieking, racing up the stairs in their socks. I watched, stunned, as the carefully arranged quiet of my home filled with squeals and the sound of tiny feet pounding on antique hardwood. Claire brushed past me with a quick, "They'll calm down," and turned to Tom. "Just set the bag on the counter." He obeyed, then muttered, "Nice place," and disappeared into the crowd. I took a deep breath and tried to reset my energy. It's just chaos. Temporary chaos. They'll settle. It's one night. I pasted on a smile and led Claire toward the backyard, where most of the guests were enjoying cocktails and the view of the garden. But Claire didn't seem to be looking at the people. She was looking at the house. Her eyes moved slowly across the back patio, the French doors, the second-story balcony. "You even got the outdoor fire pit installed," she said. "You weren't kidding when you said dream home." "Yeah," I said. "It's been a labor of love." She nodded, then looked around as if assessing the available seating. "You know, I've always loved this neighborhood. Such good schools. The girls would thrive here." There was something loaded in her tone, something I didn't have the bandwidth to unpack right then. So I smiled politely and offered her a drink. Dinner was served shortly after. The caterers had arranged the buffet beautifully, and everyone made appreciative sounds as they filled their plates. The backyard lights glowed softly as dusk settled in. And I thought, okay, this is working. The chaos has passed. I stood to give a short toast. It wasn't anything grand, just a thank you for coming, a reflection on hard work paying off, and a raised glass to new beginnings. People clapped, smiled. I sat down. And that's when Claire stood up. The scrape of her chair against the stone patio silenced everyone. "I have an announcement, too," she said, her voice loud, cheerful, and bizarrely proud. "Since tonight is about new beginnings, I'm thrilled to share that the girls and I have officially moved into this beautiful home, Silence." I laughed. Not because I thought she was joking, but because I desperately hoped she was. But she wasn't. Claire turned to the crowd, smiling like a woman on a game show who had just revealed the grand prize. "Isn't it perfect? The girls love it already. We've been staying in the attic suite for the past few nights, such a cozy space, and I just know this house will be the fresh start we need." There was a beat, then someone clapped, then another. And just like that, half the crowd began applauding. I sat frozen, a half-full champagne glass in one hand, trying to understand what had just happened. My sister had announced without my permission, without my knowledge that she and her children had moved into my house. And somehow I was being applauded for it. I didn't clap. I sat there, stunned, as a ripple of polite applause swept through the garden like a wave of misunderstanding. A few guests turned to look at me with warm, admiring smiles as if I had just performed a tremendous act of generosity instead of being blindsided in my own backyard. Claire beamed under the string lights, basking in the attention. "We're so grateful," she continued. "It just makes sense. Really, Natalie has this big, beautiful home, and the girls and I were going through such a tough time. It's a blessing for all of us." My jaw clenched. What the hell was happening? Someone called out, "That's what family is all about," my mother, who had arrived late and now sat beside a platter of roasted carrots, placed her hand dramatically over her heart and nodded along. "I'm so proud of you, Natalie," she said, loud enough for the people at the next table to hear, "always putting others first." I stood up slowly, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Claire," I said, my voice low but firm. "Can I speak to you inside privately?" Claire gave a theatrical little laugh. "Oh, come on, Nat. Don't be shy." Then she raised her glass. To family more clinking, more awkward smiles. I caught the eye of my colleague Simon across the patio. He looked confused. Janice, my friend from grad school, looked downright horrified. I turned on my heel and walked toward the house, my heels clicking sharply against the flagstone path. I needed air. I needed silence. I needed to get away from the surreal theater unfolding in my backyard. Inside. I closed the patio doors and took a breath. A deep, cold one. Claire followed a few moments later, her heels tapping behind me. "You want to explain what that was," I said, barely controlling my voice. She tilted her head. "What do you mean you announced without telling me that you've moved in?" Claire's smile faltered just slightly. "We didn't think you'd mind. We, me, and the girls." She said, "Mom, too." Honestly, she's the one who said this house was way too big for one person. And she's right. You've got, 5 bedrooms, a library, a gym? I blinked at her. That doesn't make them yours. Her tone shifted. "Natalie, don't make this about ownership. It's not like we're strangers. We're family. I thought we were past the transactional stuff." "Transactional," I said, my voice rising. "You moved into my home, Claire, secretly, and now you're parading it in front of my guests like it was your idea all along." She folded her arms. "We needed help, and you weren't picking up the phone. You were busy with your architect life. We've been drowning, Natalie. Then you ask for help." I snapped. "You don't ambush me at a party and call it gratitude. I knew you'd say no. You didn't even give me the chance to say anything." She turned away, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "The attic suite was empty. You weren't even using it. And the girls love it up there. They've already made drawings for how they want to decorate the walls." "Drawings," I repeated, dumbfounded. "You let them plan their rooms before even talking to me." Claire looked guilty for a split second and then angry. "Do you even hear yourself? You sound like a landlord." I didn't answer. My stomach twisted. From upstairs, I suddenly heard little footsteps, then giggling. A moment later, her youngest, Maisie, appeared in the hallway, holding an iPad. "Aunt Nat, look what Mommy made for our room." She tapped the screen and held it up to me. A Pinterest board titled "Our New Home, Attic Suite Makeover," with mood boards, bunk bed options, fairy lights, curtain samples, pages of planning. "You've been preparing for weeks," I said quietly. "You knew all along." Claire didn't deny it. I stared at her, trying to decide whether I was more furious or heartbroken. "Why didn't you just ask me, Claire?" Because asking gives you the power to say no, she said flatly. There it was. The raw truth. Claire hadn't just moved into my house. She had manipulated me into a situation where saying no would make me the villain, make me look cold, ungrateful, heartless, to my family, to my guests, to those 4 bright-eyed kids upstairs already choosing paint colors. I turned away from her, suddenly overwhelmed. My sanctuary, my escape from years of emotional obligation, was being colonized by a narrative I didn't write. And no one, not Claire, not even my mother, had given me the courtesy of consent. I stood in the hallway of my home with Claire's child waving an iPad full of pastel color palettes in my face. And I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was deeper than that. It was betrayal. I crouched down to Maisie's level and smiled softly. Taking the tablet from her hands, "This is lovely," I said gently. "Can you go upstairs and show your sisters? I think they'll want to see it too." She beamed. "Okay," as she skipped off, unaware of the storm brewing behind her. I turned back to Claire. "We need to talk. Now. Upstairs. Away from the guests." Claire hesitated, then followed. We climbed the stairs in tense silence. My breath was shallow. My pulse thudded in my ears. At the landing, I opened the door to what was supposed to be my private library, only to find toys, beanbags, and a pile of sleeping bags already placed in the corner. "What is this?" I whispered. Claire didn't answer. I turned to her. "You moved their stuff in already." She crossed her arms, defensive. "It's just temporary." "No, Claire, this is not temporary. You made Pinterest boards. You packed. You told the girls. You even changed the lock on my back shed." Claire flinched. "You noticed that I noticed a lot," I said, barely keeping my voice level. "You've been making decisions about my life behind my back. You didn't ask. You just assumed." "I didn't assume," she snapped. "I hoped." "No," I corrected. "You manipulated." Claire's mouth dropped open in offense. "Manipulated?" "Wow. Yes," I said. Firmly now. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You brought your kids to my housewarming, told them they lived here, and made a public announcement so I'd be too embarrassed to push back." Her face flushed. "We didn't have any other option. There's always another option. What's going on, Claire?" "Really?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time that night, she looked defeated. "We're losing the house," she said quietly. I blinked. "What? Our lease is being terminated. The landlord's selling. He gave us 30 days. I had nowhere to go. The girls, they were scared. I didn't want them to feel like we were being thrown out again." I sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to absorb the words. "You could have told me. I said, I tried," she whispered. "I called you 3 times last week. I was in back-to-back meetings. I admitted." "But you could have said it in a voicemail. You never listen to voicemails." She wasn't wrong. "But that still doesn't explain why you didn't wait. Why not just ask me to lunch? Talk it through." Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I thought you'd say no." "Claire, you always say no," she shouted suddenly. "To babysitting, to help, to birthday. You show up when it's convenient. You throw money at problems and disappear. You live in this perfect world with your perfect furniture and your perfect espresso machine, and you never ask how the rest of us are doing." I opened my mouth and then closed it again. Her words stung, because parts of them were true. I had distanced myself. I had been unavailable. And I had prioritized my work and my home and my solitude over messy family drama. But that didn't give her the right to take what wasn't offered. "That may all be true," I said finally. "But this, what you did, it wasn't fair. It wasn't respectful. You didn't give me the chance to show up. You took away my choice." She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "We're drowning," Nat, she whispered. Tom lost his job. The girls' school raised tuition. We've maxed out every credit card, and I didn't want to beg. I looked at her, really looked. The dark circles under her eyes, the way her dress hung off her frame like she hadn't eaten in days, the tears, real ones, sliding down her face. And just like that, the rage inside me softened. Not disappeared, but softened enough to see the pain behind the breach. Still, I couldn't let her rewrite the story to make this okay. I'm sorry you're going through all that, I said. But this house isn't the solution. You didn't just cross a boundary. Claire, you bulldozed it. She sank onto the carpeted floor, defeated. I didn't know what else to do. Silence hung between us, heavy and unresolved. Then I said the thing neither of us wanted to admit. You need help. But not like this. She nodded slowly, not looking at me. And for the first time all night, it felt like we were finally having a real conversation. I didn't say anything for a while. We sat in silence, me on the edge of the guest bed that was no longer a guest bed. Claire crumpled on the floor, surrounded by the shadows of her plans, Pinterest boards, sleeping bags, and expectations that had taken up residence without permission. She looked so small in that moment. My sister, who used to tower over me in every sense emotionally, physically, socially, now seemed folded in on herself, tired, desperate, and I felt torn in two. One part of me, the little sister, the one who used to cry in Claire's lap after school, bullies mocked my hand-me-down shoes, wanted to wrap my arms around her, to say, "It's okay, I've got you." But the other part, the woman who had sacrificed friendships, time, sleep, and relationships to build this life, wanted to scream, "This is my house. You don't get to just move in because your life fell apart." Both versions of me were real, and both were standing at war in the middle of that room. Finally, I spoke. "I want you to go back downstairs." Claire looked up, startled. "What, I need a moment." I said, "Alone." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. She rose slowly, brushing invisible dust from her skirt, and left the room with the quiet click of the door behind her. I stood up, crossed to the window, and stared out at the backyard. From this angle, I could see everything: the glow of the lanterns, the guests nervously trying to keep conversations going, my mother holding court near the wine table, and Tom standing awkwardly by the edge of the patio like he wanted to disappear into the hydrangeas. And in that moment, I made a choice. I crossed the hallway to my home office, opened the bottom drawer of the oak desk I had saved 5 years to afford, and pulled out the black leather portfolio I kept for special documents. Inside were 4 manila folders. I took them and walked slowly downstairs. When I entered the living room, the conversations faltered. Eyes turned to me, curious, confused, some embarrassed. Claire was sitting with her daughters on the couch. Tom was holding a glass of wine like it might save his life. My mother's lips were pursed into that tight smile she used when she was 2 seconds from declaring moral authority. I cleared my throat. "Everyone," I said, loud enough to cut through the tension, "thank you for your patience. I know this evening took a turn," a few awkward chuckles, "but since it seems this has turned into a family forum," I continued, walking to the center of the room, "I'd like to share something too." Claire sat up straighter. "Natalie, maybe we should—" I held up a hand. "No, you made your announcement. This is mine." I opened the first folder and held up a bank document. 3 weeks ago. "I found out from someone at Tom's former company, don't worry, nothing illegal, that your house was at risk of foreclosure. 5 months overdue. The bank had already filed the first notice." Claire's mouth opened. My mother gasped. Tom looked down. "I didn't want to embarrass anyone," I said. "I didn't want to judge. I wanted to help. So I called a friend in real estate finance and I bought the debt." The room went quiet. You what? Claire breathed. I now hold the lien on your house, I said. It's mine. Legally. I didn't say anything because I wanted to come to you quietly this weekend and offer you an agreement that worked for everyone. I handed her the second folder. Rent to own, I said. Reduced monthly payments. A 5-year term. With the chance to buy it back at fair market value. You keep the girls in their school. You stay near their friends. You get stability and dignity. No handouts, just help. Real help. Claire stared at the documents, speechless. And most importantly, I continued, voice firm now. You get to stay in your home, not mine. My mother stepped forward. But this house has plenty of space. This house, I cut in, is not just a building. It's mine. I worked for it, bled for it, dreamed about it. It's the one thing in my life that belongs only to me, and I will not surrender it out of guilt. The room was dead silent. I love my nieces, I said, looking directly at Claire, and I love you, but this isn't love. What you did was manipulation, and I can't allow that anymore. Not from anyone. Claire looked down at the papers in her lap. Her shoulders trembled. Her fingers clutched the contract like it might crumble if she let go. I didn't think you'd help, she whispered. I would've. I said, if you'd asked. Tom finally spoke. This is more than generous. He said, I'm sorry, Natalie. I had no idea she planned to announce it like that. Claire flinched, but didn't argue. My mother opened her mouth again, but I shook my head. No. You don't get to shame me for setting a boundary. Not anymore. She closed her mouth. One of the girls, Ellie, I think whispered something to Claire. Claire looked at her daughter, then back at me. Her eyes were wet. You're right, she said softly. You're right about everything. She looked down again. I need to think about this, she said. Not out of pride. Just, I need a minute to process that you saved us without ever saying a word. I nodded. You have time. But for tonight, I'd like you to take the girls and go home. You're home? I'll even drive you myself. She smiled weakly. I'll call an Uber. Tom nodded. Let's go, girls. The girls protested, but quietly. Claire didn't argue. She stood, still holding the folders. Before leaving, she turned to me at the door. I'm sorry, she said. Really, I believe you, I replied, but we're not doing this dynamic anymore. No more guilt, no more silent expectations. If you want help, you ask. And if I say no, you respect it, I will, she said. They left. I stood alone in my living room as my guests began quietly exiting one by one. Some patted my shoulder. Some said nothing. But I didn't care. I had done what needed to be done. That night, I sat in the garden with a glass of wine, barefoot, silent, exhausted but clear. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself not just for succeeding, but for standing up for the peace I had built with my own hands. The house was quiet again. After Claire and the girls left, and the final guest gave me an awkward hug at the door, I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by half-empty wine glasses and untouched trays of food. The candles had melted down to little pools of wax, the music had long stopped playing, and the silence felt both peaceful and painfully loud. I walked slowly through each room, picking up napkins, smoothing pillows, resetting chairs, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind caught up to what had just happened. I had drawn a line that night, a firm, visible line, and I hadn't backed down. I thought I would feel guilty, but instead, I felt lighter. I poured myself a final glass of wine and walked out to the back patio. The string lights still twinkled above me, casting a soft golden glow across the lawn. The air was cool, the stars clear, and for the first time since I bought this house, I felt like I belonged in it. It wasn't just mine legally. It was mine emotionally, mine spiritually, because I had defended it not just as a place, but as a symbol of everything I had worked so hard to create. And yet, even in that clarity, there was something else, a quiet ache, not regret but sadness. Sadness that things had to unfold this way, that Claire had felt she couldn't come to me honestly, that years of built-up resentment and unspoken expectations had finally exploded into public drama. The next morning, I woke up early, not out of anxiety this time, but instinct. I made myself a strong coffee and sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through my phone. At the top of my messages was a text from Claire. Can we talk, just the two of us? No mom. No audience. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed, yes. Name the place. We met that afternoon at a quiet cafe halfway between her rental house and my neighborhood. She wore a faded hoodie and no makeup. Her hair was tied up in a loose knot. She looked tired but real. When I walked in, she stood awkwardly, unsure whether to hug me. I saved her the trouble. I hugged her first. We sat down, ordered coffee, and then for a moment just sat, letting the steam rise between us. Then Claire broke the silence. I owe you the biggest apology of my life, she said quietly. What I did was manipulative, selfish, and unfair. My eyes widened. I wasn't expecting that much honesty that fast. I was scared, she continued. But that doesn't excuse ambushing you in your own house, or using the girls to guilt you, or lying about moving in. None of it. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. I told myself you wouldn't help, she said, because it was easier than admitting I hadn't actually tried asking, because asking meant giving you a choice. And I didn't want to hear no. I might have said yes. I replied, maybe not to you moving in, but to something else. Something respectful. I know that now, she said. She took a deep breath. Tom and I talked all night. We read the agreement you gave us. It's more than fair. He cried. I didn't even know he could cry anymore. That made me smile, just a little. We want to accept it, she said. The rent-to-own deal. It gives us hope, and more importantly, it gives us agency. I exhaled. Relief washed through me like warm water. I'm glad, I said. I meant what I said. Claire, I want to help, but not at the cost of my peace, and not under pressure. I get it now. She said, I think, for a long time, I resented your independence, your success. It was easier to call you selfish than to admit I was jealous. I looked at her, surprised by her vulnerability, and I was distant. I admitted, I've been so caught up in building my own world, I didn't realize how far I drifted from yours. She looked up, eyes glassy. Maybe this was the storm we needed. I nodded. Maybe. We sipped our coffees in silence for a few minutes. Then Claire smiled faintly. I told the girls about the house, about how we get to keep it. You should have seen their faces. I wish I had. They still want to visit your place. She added, Maisie's obsessed with the pool. Well, I said, the guest room with the window seat is still open. Claire chuckled. She's already claimed it. We both laughed, then really laughed. For the first time in what felt like years, that afternoon, we didn't solve every issue. But we started something new, a relationship built on mutual respect. Not obligation, not guilt, not manipulation, and definitely not silence. 3 weeks after this housewarming party that turned into an emotional war zone, my life looked very different, but not in the ways I feared. Claire and Tom signed the rent-to-own agreement. The ink had barely dried before Claire sent me a photo of the girls hanging a homemade welcome home sign on their old front door. The joy in their faces, it was the kind of happiness that couldn't be faked. Real, rooted, safe. They hadn't needed square footage, they needed stability, and for once, I'd helped without losing myself in the process. We began rebuilding our relationship, one small, intentional step at a time. It started with a weekly check-in. Just a text. "How's your Tuesday going?" Maisie says hi. "Found that wine you like at Trader Joe's?" Nothing heavy, just honest, regular connection, the kind that wasn't loaded with expectation. Then came the dinners. Claire invited me over first. She cooked. The girls set the table. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of warmth and laughter that didn't feel forced. The second dinner was at my house. They swam in the pool. I grilled on the back patio, and for the first time, the echo of little feet running through my home didn't feel like an invasion. It felt like a visit. My relationship with my mom took longer to mend. She still clung to her belief that families should live under one roof, sharing everything like we were trapped in some 1950s ideal, but even she couldn't deny how much better Claire seemed, lighter, calmer, less reactive. Eventually, she admitted, maybe boundaries aren't as cold as I thought. Maybe they're clarifying. That was her way of saying I'd been right. In her language, that was monumental. As for me, I started going to therapy, something I should have done years ago. I unpacked the guilt I'd carried my entire adult life, the burden of being the responsible one, the successful one, the selfish one whenever I didn't say yes. My therapist told me something in our second session that stuck with me. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and still love myself. That sentence rewired something inside me. I realized I didn't have to choose between being a good sister and being a whole person. I could care without collapsing. I could help without handing over the keys to my peace. Claire started seeing a counselor too. She told me, quietly, that she wanted to learn how to ask for help the right way. Not with guilt, with dignity. We were growing, separately, and together. 6 months later, I hosted another gathering at my home. No caterers this time, no grand speeches, just family and a few close friends. Claire brought her famous spinach dip. The girls brought matching pajamas for a sleepover. My mom brought pie and fewer opinions. Toward the end of the night, as we all sat around the outdoor fire pit, Claire raised her glass and said, "To Natalie, who taught us that love isn't about proximity, it's about permission." I felt tears sting my eyes. Later, after everyone had gone to bed or headed home, I stood barefoot on my back patio, looking up at the stars. The same house surrounded me, same wood floors, same marble countertops, same garden I'd planted with such care, but it felt different. Not because I'd given it away, because I'd defended it, because I'd made room for others. Yes, but also for myself. That was the difference, not sacrifice, sovereignty. And somehow, in the middle of all the chaos, I'd found something I never thought I needed, not just a home, but a healthy family. Maybe not perfect, but real.